Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are the National Caucus and Center on Black Aging and the Health and Wellness Program. As we observe Older Americans Month, we are presenting fraud and scams, how to avoid them through a relationship with your bank. Our presenters today are Lisa Weintraub Schifferly and Erin Scheith with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. Lisa Weintraub Schifferly is a senior policy analyst in the CFPB Office for Older Americans. She leads the Managing Someone Else's Money program and supports the office work to combat elder financial exploitation. Ms. Schifferly's career in consumer protection spans more than 20 years. She worked previously at the Federal Trade Commission and the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau and received her Bachelor of Arts degree, summa cum laude, from Yale College and her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Virginia School of Law. Erin Scheith served as the Content and Outreach Specialist for the Office of Older Americans at the CFPB. The majority of Erin's work experience has been in the field of financial education. Previously, she worked for the American Bankers Association, North Carolina Bankers Association, and the AARP. Erin obtained both a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Virginia. Welcome, ladies, and thank you. We'll begin with Lisa. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. And actually, it looks like Deborah Royster, the head of the CFPB's Office for Older Americans, has been able to join us. So I will let her kick off the presentation. Erin, if you're able to pull up the slides.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. You can? Okay, I see you shaking your head. Great. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. My name is Deborah Royster, and I am Assistant Director of the Office for Older Americans. It is our pleasure and honor to join you. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the NCBA for the opportunity to partner today to discuss this important topic for older adults and really for all of us, fraud and scams, and how to avoid fraud and scams through a relationship with your bank or your credit union. It is an honor and privilege to work with the NCBA. I've worked with many of your colleagues, with Angela, with Karen Jones, Dwight Mays, and Angie Body over the years on key issues impacting older adults. Under their stellar leadership, the NCBA is an influential voice for older adults, and the work of this great organization to serve older adults, including older adults of color with housing and other critical support services, is highly respected and highly valued. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today to discuss this important topic. So today we're going to talk about fraud and scams with a focus on how to avoid fraud and scams through a relationship with your bank. As you may know, reports of fraud and scams and various types of fraudulent practices increased significantly during COVID-19. And in 2021, the Federal Trade Commission received over 5.7 million reports of fraud, identity theft, and other scams. And this was a significant increase from the prior year. Older adults were targeted by romance scammers, imposters, identity thieves, as well as other variety of other types of fraudsters. And scams really affect every community. A 2017 FTC survey revealed that 19.2% of African Americans and 17.3% of Hispanic consumers were victims of fraud, compared to 14.9% of non-Hispanic white customers. One way older adults can avoid fraud and scams is through relationship banking. And that is having a relationship with your bank, like in the old days when you used to go to the bank and the teller knew who you were. If your banker knows you, then they may be more likely to spot fraud and scams that may happen to you. And today we will also discuss things that you can put in place to help prevent yourself from becoming a victim of fraud and scam. One of these practices we'll talk about is a trusted contact that you can, it is a person you can designate by going into your bank. It's someone you can designate that the bank could call in the event of suspected financial exploitation or other fraudulent activity. So before we dive in, I have a quick disclaimer, and then I'd like to tell you a little bit about our agency. This presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative on behalf of the Bureau, and it does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and any opinions or views that are stated by me are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of the Bureau. So let's talk a little bit about the mission of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If you're not familiar with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I'd like to talk a little bit about us. The Bureau's mission is to help consumer finance markets work by making rules more effective, by consistently and fairly enforcing those rules, and by empowering consumers to take more control over their economic lives. We are an agency of the federal government. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a federal government agency with a focus on financial protection. So if you have trouble with your bank, your lender, or if a credit bureau is treating you unfairly, then the CFPB is a place where you can turn for help. Next slide, please. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Office for Older Americans. The Office for Older Americans elevates key issues and challenges that impact older adults and their families. And we work to help protect older consumers from financial harm and to help older consumers make sound financial decisions at key moments in their financial lives. Many of our resources are targeted towards adults age 62 and older, financial caregivers, or professionals who interact with older adults. And several of our resources are focused on helping older adults and their families and caregivers and professionals who serve older adults to help fight elder financial exploitation. Today, you will hear from two members of the Office for Older Americans team. First, Lisa Schifferly will talk about elder financial exploitation. And then Aaron Scheithe will discuss relationship banking and trusted contacts. And now I'd like to turn the program over to my colleague, Lisa Schifferly. Lisa?
Thanks so much, Deborah. And thanks again to NCBA for inviting us here today. My name is Lisa Schifferly, and I'm a senior policy analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. I'm going to set the stage by talking a little bit about elder financial exploitation broadly. And then, as Deborah said, Aaron will talk a little bit more about how age-friendly banking practices can help address elder financial exploitation. So just to give you a sense of the context, studies show that financial exploitation is the most common form of elder abuse, and estimates of annual losses to older adults have ranged from $2.9 billion to $36.5 billion. Plus, as Deborah noted, fraud and scams have skyrocketed during the pandemic. So let's talk about the definition of elder financial abuse. What do we mean when we use that term? To get everyone on the same page today, I want to share this general definition. This is a pretty long legal definition on the slide, but basically when we're talking about elder financial exploitation, what we mean is that someone is stealing or misusing an older person's money or resources. So who's at risk? It's really important to note that anyone can be the victim of elder financial exploitation. It doesn't matter what race you are. It crosses all social, educational, and economic boundaries. Anyone can be the victim of financial exploitation. So to give you some ideas about how elder financial abuse might happen, it can happen in a whole variety of different ways. It could be someone who has a legal obligation to handle an older adult's finances, and they might fail to use the funds for necessities like food, clothing, shelter, or healthcare, putting that older adult at risk of harm. When we talk about people with legal obligations, we're talking about fiduciaries like agents under power of attorney, trustees, guardians, Social Security representative payees, or it could be an informal caregiver who an older person gives money to run errands or to buy their prescription drugs for them on their behalf. So another way that elder financial abuse could happen is if family or other individuals step in to manage an older adult's finances and try to take money or assets for themselves. Now, this can happen, maliciously, or it can sometimes happen somewhat inadvertently. For example, say someone who's a financial caregiver buys a car in order to drive the older adult to and from appointments, but they really use that car more for their own personal use. That could be an example of financial abuse that you might not think of right away. Or say the older person needs roof work done and the financial caregiver hires a friend. That might not be necessarily in the older person's best interest and might also be an example of financial abuse. So it's not always a very clear cut, straight up and down, just stealing the money type situation. Now, in other cases, a perpetrator might have no legal right to manage the older adult's money. Someone might take possessions and control of the older adult's property by pressuring them, misleading or lying to them, or they might try to gain the older adult's trust by promising to care for them if they provide access to their bank account. So let's talk a little bit more about some facts about financial abuse. I want to share a few facts that help show the scope and impact of elder financial abuse. Unfortunately, like I said, financial abuse is the most common form of elder abuse. So when we're talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse is the most common according to a number of studies. In fact, a 2017 review of US studies found that about 5.6% of older adults living in the broader community had experienced fraud or scams. So the broader community is basically anybody not in a nursing home or assisted living, but just living out in their own community. So who could be an abuser? Again, just like anyone can be a victim, pretty much anyone could be an abuser. The perpetrators include a wide variety of people. It can be someone who the older adult knows, like a family member or caregiver, or a friend or neighbor, or maybe someone at a place of worship. It can be someone who has that sort of financial relationship, like an agent under power of attorney or a financial professional. And abusers can also be strangers. They can be, these are the scammers that you usually think of, somebody who calls you and tries to get your money either by phone or on the internet. You can have home repair contractors, Medicare scams, romance scams. We'll talk about a number of the different types of scams that you may see. So let's get into some of those examples of elder financial exploitation. And I'll talk about some of the most common scams facing older adults, like romance scams, tech support scams, and family emergencies. But first, let's look at these trends. This is from the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission's Consumer Sentinel data, and they got 5.7 million reports in 2021. This is the most latest data from last year. And the top 3 types of reports they got were, number 1 was identity theft, number 2 was imposter scams, and number 3 had to do with credit bureaus or credit reporting issues. So we see a lot of the issues that we're talking about in terms of elder financial exploitation can involve identity theft or some of the imposter scams that I'll talk about in a minute. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see information about financial loss due to scams. Now we know that sometimes people will report the scam, but they'll recognize it and not lose money to it. The good news here is that of all the people who reported fraud or scams, only 25% reported losing money to the fraud. So 75% are not losing money to the fraud. And we know that if you can recognize scams, you're much less likely to lose money to them, which is why it's so important to share this knowledge about scams. And we hope that when you complete this webinar, you'll share what you learn in your community as well. Let's look at how older adults are affected by scams. And these are some trends that are also from Consumer Sentinel data. And it may be surprising to some people because contrary to what many people believe, younger adults are actually more likely to report losing money to scams than older people. So that's what you see on the left-hand side there. But on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that when older adults do report losing money, they report much higher dollar losses than younger people. So on the right, you'll see a median loss of $1,500 for people over age 80, compared to only $500 for people in their 20s. So you can see from this data why it's so important to focus on the issue of scams facing older adults. And one more data slide I want to show you before we talk about the scams. This slide shows how romance scams are at an all-time high. I know the numbers are pretty small to read, but it's going up over the years. And you can see that the last column there in 2021, reported losses to romance scammers were up nearly 80% compared to 2020. And the total reported loss over the past 5 years has now reached over $1 billion. But you can see how the romance scams have really skyrocketed in the past couple years during the pandemic. So let's talk about romance scams, or sometimes they're called online dating scams. They usually happen when you meet someone online. It can be through a dating app, or it can be just through a regular social media platform or email. And they start what seems to be a relationship with you, but then they start asking for money, either for a medical procedure sometimes, or for some other emergency, or oftentimes it's for travel to visit you. In a new twist on the scam, a lot of these romance scammers are now teaching people how to invest in cryptocurrency, but they aren't really teaching you how to invest in cryptocurrency. They're telling you how to send them money via cryptocurrency. So that's an unfortunate new twist on the romance scam. Sometimes they also ask you to wire money or put it on a prepaid card or buy a gift card and read the numbers off the back. So if any of you know someone who's been involved in a romance scam, you probably understand that the scams pull on people's heartstrings. And so it can be a particularly difficult scam to convince a friend or family member that it is in fact a scam. So what are some ways to recognize an online dating or romance scam? The big tip off is that the love interest is asking for money for an emergency or travel, especially if this is someone that you've never met in person before. I mean, one of the big tips we give is don't send money or give access to your accounts to someone you've not met in person. And also to limit what personal financial information you share with a new love, and limit what personal information you share online. So also important to think about how people are asking you to pay. Is a big technique of scammers of all types of scams to ask for payment by wire transfer, by gift card, or increasingly by cryptocurrency, because those are all methods where they get the money very quickly, and it's almost impossible for you to get your money back once you send it that way. So that is a big red flag if you look at how you're being asked to pay. Now on the next slide, you'll see a really helpful tool if you want to spread the word about online dating scams to help people, hopefully not lose money to them. The CFPB offers this fraud prevention handout, which you can find at consumerfinance.gov/placemats. We have a variety of these free fraud prevention handouts and placemats and activity sheets on how to avoid different types of scams. They were originally designed to be used by meal delivery programs, but they were so popular that now they're being used by community or faith-based organizations, financial institutions, or other groups. And you can order them in bulk online in English and in Spanish. Again, you find them at consumerfinance.gov/placemats, and they're really a great way to help others prevent online dating scams and a variety of other scams. So the next scam I want to tell you about are tech support scams. While romance scams are the highest dollar loss for older adults, Tech support scams are one of the most prevalent or common scams affecting older adults. The dollar losses may not be as high, but they happen to a lot of people. So this may happen if you get a call from someone who claims to be from tech support and they say they need to remote into your computer, or maybe you get a pop-up on your computer telling you to call tech support, or an email with a link to click on. So what they do is they remote into your computer and they steal your personal information, or sometimes they try to sell you phony tech support services that you usually don't need and that are worthless and that are not actually cleaning up your computer. So to guard against these tech support scams, this slide has some tips and some safeguards, which are: don't give control of your computer to someone who calls you out of the blue. Even if they claim to be from, say, Microsoft or Apple, that's not the way it works. If they call you, you don't know who they are, even if your caller ID says it is who they say it is. It's much better to call back at a number you know to be correct. Also, don't click on links in unsolicited pop-ups or emails. They can download malware, which can then take information from your computer. And it's also really good to keep antivirus software up to date in order to try to guard against these scams. You can even set your antivirus to auto update so you don't have to worry about it as much. On the next slide, you'll see another one of the fraud prevention placemats that I talked about. This one's called Play It Safe Online, and it has a bunch of basic online safety tips to pass along to people you know. Things like lock your device and use strong passwords, at least 12 characters, also limiting what personal information you share online, and knowing the red flags of scams like we've talked about today. So this is another great one to share in your community, to pass on knowledge and hopefully help prevent things like tech support scams. Now, the last scam I want to talk about before I hand things over to Erin are family emergency scams. This is another one that really pulls on people's heartstrings, and it does often target or affect older adults. This is an imposter scam that usually happens on the phone, and they call and they say, "Grandma, I'm stuck in another country. I just got in a car accident. I need you to wire money to me right away." Or they may say, "I'm in jail. I need bail money wired, or I need it sent by gift card." Again, the payment method is a big red flag of the scam. They usually say, "Don't tell mom and dad. I'm in trouble. I don't want them to know." So sometimes this is called the grandparent scam. Sometimes it's called the family emergency scam, but they basically say there's some sort of emergency and plead with you to immediately wire money. Sometimes they even follow up with another call claiming to be from the sheriff's office, confirming, the supposed story, or claiming to be from the jail, confirming a story about them being in jail. But again, the big thing to know about these telephone imposter scams is that if somebody calls you, you can't trust caller ID and you don't know who it is calling you. You need to hang up and call back at a number you know to be correct, especially with these family emergency scams. Try to text or call someone else in the family to confirm the story, even though they're saying, "Don't tell mom or dad." Next slide, please. So these are some of the examples of the scams that we've heard about today. And next, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Erin Scheithe, who will talk about ways you can protect yourself or your loved ones by choosing a financial caregiver carefully and setting up trusted contacts. Erin?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm trying to start my video, and there we go. Okay. We're having some tech difficulties this afternoon. Thanks for bearing with us. Okay, so now we talked a little bit about frauds and scams, and there are certainly many different ways that are changing all the time. But there are ways that you can help protect yourself and protect your loved ones. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. One of the ways that we can do that is by choosing a financial caregiver. And I'd like for you to consider thinking about this as almost an emergency contact for your finances. So if you are going to the doctor's office and you're filling out the forms, often they'll ask for an emergency contact or someone who you'd like your doctor's office to contact if you have any issues. So this is similar. A financial caregiver would be someone who you have talked to, who you trust, who can step in if you need some assistance. There are a couple of different kinds of financial caregivers. Informal, that could be something as simple as I talk to my sister and share with her that I have an account at this bank, that I have this type of account. I don't share any personal information or financial information with her, but she's kind of an informal conversation partner. You can also choose a formal caregiver, someone who has a more official role. Maybe that's a legal document that's signed. And we're also going to talk about choosing the right person. So we have a guide for this, and I'll share with you how to access that guide in just a few minutes. As I mentioned, there's this conversation partner who would maybe help on an as-needed basis. That could be a trusted relative, a friend, or even a professional who has just a basic overview of your finances. You could even ask your banker or investment broker, if you have one, to send a copy of your statements to an adult child or to your accountant. That's something like a conversation partner. A trusted contact person is, Deborah mentioned this right at the beginning of our webinar. This is a more formal agreement. This is that kind of emergency contact for either a brokerage account, like if you have an investment portfolio, or some banks offer this as well. It allows the financial institution to know who to contact if you're having an issue, if they think you're being scammed. Trusted contacts don't have access to your money, so that's the most important thing. They do not have access to your money, but the financial institution, like the bank teller or the credit union teller, could contact them if you come to the bank with a very unusual situation. Trusted contacts are available, like I said, if you have a brokerage account, but you can ask at your bank as well. An example of this might be if I go to the bank and say, I need to get $10,000 out of my account in cash. I'm sending it to my boyfriend who lives in another country, like let's say he lives in, France or something. And I've never mentioned this person before at the bank, and $10,000 is a lot of money for me. So they think this seems a little bit odd. We'd like to call her trusted contact or her emergency contact and see if this story shakes out. It could be something like that. That's a dramatic example though. $10,000 is a lot of money to almost every person. It could be something much smaller, like you go to the bank and say, I need $100 to purchase some gift cards that I'm going to send to someone who's going to fix my computer. That's, again, a less dramatic example, but a similar situation. If you have a relationship with your bank, meaning you go in regularly or you call, you know someone at the branch, bank or credit union, you have a relationship with your bank, and that relationship can be helpful. If you do go in a situation like I suggested before, and they know that that's really an out of character situation for you, that relationship with your bank can help you avoid fraud because they would know to contact your trusted contact. Another way you can have a relationship with a bank that is helpful for preventing fraud is if you have a convenience account. In some banks or credit unions, this could also be called an agency account. And this lets someone help you deposit or withdraw money and write checks. So if you are someone who needs some assistance when you leave the home, you may find a convenience account works well for you. Because let's say you have a niece who does your grocery shopping for you, because grocery shopping is difficult for you. Maybe you have some mobility issues. This convenience account could give your niece access to maybe $100 of a limit, something like that. That doesn't change the ownership in your account. It's not a joint account, but it lets someone else help you with running errands or things like that. And so it would help you, it would help them help you, I should say. So the money would still belong to you. Those are all pretty informal types of financial caregivers. Sure, you're naming someone, but there's no legal situation involved. So for that situation, if you wanted to do something that's a little bit more formal, it might be time for a fiduciary or a formal caregiver. We have a series of 4 guides for financial caregivers. You might have heard the term agent under a power of attorney. That's when, we'll talk a little bit about this, but that's when you have a legal agreement. You could have a guardian of property or a conservator. You could have a trustee or even a Social Security or VA representative payee. So these are all formal legal documents that people must sign in order to give some control over your money to someone else. So in this case, there would be a legal arrangement. And there are a lot of things to think about when choosing anyone from an informal financial caregiver all the way to that very formal legal document. You want to ask yourself a series of questions, and I've listed them here on the screen. Do I trust this person? Do I feel comfortable sharing the way I want my money to be spent and saved with them? And will they do as I want them to do? I think that's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important questions. Not only do I feel comfortable sharing my wishes with them, but will they carry them out in the way that I've asked? Are they willing and able to take on this responsibility? You should ask them that. You should also take a look at the way they live their life and see if that's something that they could do. Someone who has trouble managing their own finances might not be the best choice for something like this. Will they make decisions in your best interest? If you are impaired in a way where you can't make decisions for yourself, are they going to make those decisions with the best intentions for you in mind? Will they manage my money and property carefully? Meaning, as Lisa alluded to earlier, will they use my car, fill it up with gas only for my errands that need to be run, and not get a new car or use that car for their personal business of driving Uber or something? So that could be one way that you could check. Will they be able to keep their money separate from my money? Another thing that's incredibly important is keeping good records. So will they be able to hang on to receipts and take a look at bank statements? Now, we mentioned trusted contacts a little bit earlier. This is a practice that, that is definitely possible at a brokerage account, meaning if you do have an investment advisor. But it is also something that's getting some steam with banks and credit unions. So again, this would be that emergency contact person. So we are encouraging banks and credit unions to consider offering this to their customers because generally that financial institution can only reach out in specific situations, like if they think you're at risk for financial exploitation. Again, we want to stress that the trusted contact does not have access to the money that's in your account, but they could step in and help connect you as the account holder with your financial institution if there are any issues. We do have a consumer advisory about trusted contacts. And we'll share this link with you in the chat because I think it could be a really helpful resource for you to read. You can even take this resource into your credit union or bank with you to let them know and to better explain the type of help that you are seeking. So we'll share this in the link. In the chat, I'm sorry, we'll share the link in the chat. And there are other resources that we just want to share with you. Moneysmart for Older Adults is a program that we developed with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The FDIC is the federal agency that protects your money at a bank. So you've probably seen or heard in ads, a bank will say member FDIC. That just means that they are insuring your deposits should anything happen at the bank. We worked with them to create the Moneysmart for Older Adults program, which is really almost an encyclopedia of different types of frauds and scams. So Lisa mentioned several in her presentation: tech support, online dating, grandparent scams, but there are many more that you should be aware of. And the Moneysmart for Older Adults resource guide can be helpful to you. You can refer back to it if you need to. This is also a program where it's a training that you can provide to your friends, neighbors, your church congregation maybe. So if this is an area where you feel excited and comfortable to share information about fraud and scam prevention, this could be a really great resource for you. And then we have the placemats that Lisa mentioned. These are really just larger handouts, which actually is helpful that they are larger in size in case you or anyone you know has vision impairment. So the font size is a little bit bigger. They're very simple and effective messages around different types of frauds and scams, and you can download them and print them off from your computer. You can email them to friends, and you could even encourage others to order them in bulk for free, and you could pass them out again at your at a book club, at your apartment complex, at your church, something like that. So they're a good resource to have. And if you do have a financial caregiver in this formal role, the Managing Someone Else's Money guides are really a plain language, step-by-step guide to take the agent under power of attorney or the trustee through their responsibilities to you as your financial caregiver. Those are available in English and in Spanish, and we can put the link in the chat for those as well. Our website is consumerfinance.gov, and our Older Americans website is consumerfinance.gov/olderamericans. You can find the resources that Lisa and I spoke about on our site. You can find a lot of other resources as well that may be helpful to you. If you have any questions, I would encourage you to shoot us an email at olderamericans@cfpb.gov, and we can point you in the right direction. Now, I know we have a couple of questions in the chat, so I guess, do you want to ask some of those questions?
Yes, thank you, Erin, and thank you, Deborah and Lisa, for your thoughtful presentation. And we especially appreciate you joining us during Older Americans Month. And so at this time, we'd like to invite our guests to ask their questions in the chat. And to kick us off, I'm going to read some of those questions. Question number 1 reads, could you recommend a good antivirus program for my mother's computer?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, as government employees, we're not allowed to recommend or endorse any particular product. But what you can do to try to find good antivirus is look at some sort of ranking that's done by a reputable organization like PC Mag or PC World or CNET or US News. All have reviews of various different antivirus software that can give you an idea of which ones are more highly ranked or more reputable than others.
Thank you, Lisa. The second question reads, how should I report to CFPB recent texts I've received and saved that seem to come from my bank and the USPS?
You can report them to the CFPB at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. So once you send a report there, we will send it to the bank or the other institution that we cover, and then they are supposed to get us back a response within 10 days. So the nice thing about filing a report with the CFPB is we do reach out to the financial institution or the credit reporting agency to try to get a response for you and then let you know what the bank or other entities said. Now, the consumerfinance.gov/complaint is the place to do that. I should mention, though, that that is primarily for complaints related to financial institutions or lenders. So if you're dealing with some of the other scams, you'd want to report it to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov.
Thank you, Lisa. Another question reads, several cell phone carriers offer older adults discounts if they have Medicaid. In order to get the discount, you have to present your Medicaid card. I'm uncomfortable doing so. What should I do to get the discount and not to get scammed?
I'd be uncomfortable doing that too. I think that's a wise discomfort, and it's good to, as my friend said, trust your spidey senses when it comes to these types of things. I would not give a Medicaid or Medicare number in order to get a discount on a cell phone. That doesn't make sense that they would need that. It seems like they're trying to get your personal information. If you want a discounted phone plan, I know you could look at places like AARP have special phone plans for older adults, and there may be other ones, but I wouldn't give a Medicare or Medicaid number to get a cell phone plan.
Thank you, Lisa. And then the next question asks if you can speak to counterfeit prescription drug scams. Many of us are using teleservices and the internet to find better prices on our drugs. How can we safeguard ourselves against getting scammed and still get the drugs that we need?
That's also a great question. I mean, you can talk, if you're on Medicare, I would go to medicare.gov and call 1-800-Medicare for more assistance, because I know there are a bunch of prescription drug plans that are scams. The FTC has brought cases against a number of them. You could actually Google FTC and prescription drug scam to see what are some of the companies that already have orders against them for being fraudulent. So at least you could rule out those companies, but there are always new ones popping up. So it is something to definitely be careful about and make sure you're ordering prescriptions through, talk to your doctor, talk to Medicare, or go to medicare.gov.
Thank you. And the next question in the chat reads, if an individual can't afford to hire an attorney to set up a financial arrangement between my loved one and I, are there free resources to help my family, to help me manage my money?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. I mean, one free resource are the managing someone else's money guides that Erin pointed out. But if you're looking for someone to draw up the legal documents, like the power of attorney documents, it is frankly hard to find those. You may want to check with your state bar association or your local legal aid organization to see if they're aware of any resources in your area, because it's based on state law, so you'll need to look within your state. Some states or counties have, will clinics or estate planning clinics that also may give you a free power of attorney along with a free will if you qualify income wise, or at least a lower priced one. So I would check with legal aid or check with your local bar association.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And the next question reads, can you please offer any guidance on personal email accounts? I'm told that Yahoo, Outlook, AOL, it alerts scammers. It tells them my age.
I'm laughing because I've heard this recently too, that yes, younger people tend to use Gmail. I still have one of those older ones myself. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that it doesn't necessarily alert people your age, but to a certain extent, I guess some people think that younger people use Gmail. And, you know, older people may use Hotmail or AOL or Yahoo, like you said. So, I mean, if you want to move to a more recent email platform, you're welcome to do that. I don't know how much of a difference it makes in scam prevention or how much scammers are using that as a way to target people.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question.
Probably, sorry, I should add to that, but I mean, one important thing you could do regardless of the email you use is consider two-factor authentication for a lot of accounts, so that, you know, if you're, especially financial accounts, you know, in addition to an email, you'd get a code sent to your cell phone or something that adds an extra layer of protection regardless of the email address you're using.
Okay. And just to build on that, Lisa, a little bit, what if an individual doesn't use a cell phone?
Well, then, I mean, that is the most common form of the second factor, but usually you can have a second factor as another email account or a home. You can use a landline even. Sometimes it'll give you the voice to landline message.
Okay, thank you. The next question in the chat reads, if I report fraud to my bank, will they automatically give me my money back?
Well, if they did, then we'd have a lot more people losing money to fraud, but no, they won't automatically give money back. They have to, you know, determine that it is fraud. It depends on how you notify them. It is really important to notify your financial institution as quickly as possible, because there are some laws that, you know, put limits on how much you can get back depending on how long you wait to tell them after you find out about the fraud. So once you know that there's fraud, it is important to report it right away, but no, you can't say that you definitely automatically get the money back.
Okay, looks like we have another banking question here, and it reads, my bank doesn't mandate deposit slips, and they don't always offer a receipt. Should I get a receipt? Should I request a deposit slip to ensure this transaction actually occurred and that I don't get scammed?
I can address this one. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I would say it should be up to you to determine whether or not you want to use a deposit slip. Just because they don't need one doesn't mean they can't use one. But I would always recommend getting a receipt from any transaction. So make sure you state that up front when you approach the teller line. Let them know that you would like a receipt and that they should be able to give that to you. And in some, they may be able to email you a receipt. If you want it in print, say, I would like a print receipt from my transaction today.
Okay, thank you, Erin. And just to build on that a little bit, if I'm depositing money via an ATM machine and that machine doesn't dispense a receipt, what can I do to safeguard my transaction?
ATMs are generally pretty safe, so I want to say that, but of course things happen. So if you are concerned about depositing and using the ATM and you're able to go through the drive-through, or you're able to go in person and you feel safe and comfortable doing that, it sounds like that might be a better option. Always request a receipt from the ATM. And you can even, if one does not dispense because either it's out of receipt paper or something like that, write down the location of the ATM, the transaction time. So if it was at 1:55 p.m. on a Tuesday, May 17th, write all of that down and then go back to your bank. Depositing cash in an ATM, if you are someone who worries about this, maybe that's not the best fit for you, and maybe it would make more sense to go into a branch. And I know that's not always convenient. So you have to decide what your level of risk is. However, there are things called skimmers and other things that can kind of take your ATM card number and things like that. So look at the ATM itself. If you're making a deposit, you shouldn't have to worry about using an ATM that isn't your bank, because of course, in order to deposit into your account at an ATM, it has to be your bank's ATM. But always look at the ATM and make sure that the place where you either swipe or insert your card looks right, if that makes sense. And it's just like at the gas station. If you go to the gas station, this is where some of these skimmers can happen as well. Look at them and make sure that there's not, a different color plastic kind of sticking out or something like that. So just be aware. Use ATMs that either belong to your bank or belong to another well-known bank, instead of an ATM in the back of a restaurant or in a store. Sometimes those aren't quite as well maintained as the one that is attached to your bank.
Thank you, Erin. And there's a follow-up to your remarks. Is it safe to use the ATM machine at your grocery store?
It's safe is always going to be this calculated risk that you have to decide whether or not you are, willing to make. If the ATM is your own bank ATM at the grocery store, like I know some banks have, I think Walmart has Woodbury. There are a couple of other large chain stores that have relationships with financial institutions. So that could work. Again, just take a look at the ATM, make sure that everything looks as it should. And if you are suspicious, then don't use it. If you want to get cash back from a purchase at the point of sale, meaning when you pay for your groceries and you use your ATM card and it asks you if you want to get cash back, maybe that would be a better option for you than using an ATM from a bank you're not familiar with.
Thank you. Thank you for your guidance, Erin. And it looks like we have 2 minutes and we have 2 questions to go. So the next question reads, if I report a scam to CFPB, what happens next? Will somebody from your agency call me? What will happen? How do I know my scam has been resolved and so forth?
Yeah, I can start that one, Lisa, and then please feel free to jump in with additional thoughts. As Lisa mentioned, if you're reporting scams and fraud, the Federal Trade Commission is a good place to do that. And Lisa can maybe talk a little bit about what that process is like, because lucky for us, she used to work there too. But for the CFPB, if you file a complaint with us or you report a situation to us, if you do it on our online portal, which is what we recommend, and I know that's not best for everyone, so I do have an alternative, but if you do it in your online portal, you'll receive a case number and you'll be able to log into our website and kind of follow your case through the complaint process. I did that. I had an issue with my financial institution. I filed a complaint with CFPB, got a number, and received email updates and was able to log into that portal to see the progress of my complaint until it was eventually resolved. If you're not comfortable submitting a complaint over the computer, you can do it over the phone. And the number for that is 855-411-CFPB. So 273-2372. Check me on that, but it's 855-411-CFPB on your telephone keypad, and they can walk you through the complaint process over the phone. You'll still get a complaint ID number that you can check on. You'll be able to call that number back and check on the status of your complaint if you submit over the phone. Again, submitting online is probably a little bit better just because you can upload receipts or other documentation about your complaint or about your report. And Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about the FTC reporting process?
Sure, the FTC takes complaints at reportfraud.ftc.gov. That's for reports about scams. When you report there, you can, if you do it by phone, you can talk to a counselor who can give you some information. Otherwise, they'll send you links to information related to the scam or fraud that you called about. They're not able to actually work individual cases, but it is still important to report these frauds, because by reporting, when they see a pattern of a lot of complaints against a certain company, then they can take action to try to shut down that fraudulent company. If you do want individual assistance, you may want to contact your state attorney general or local consumer protection agency in addition to the FTC.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Aaron. And we are exactly at 2:01. So if it's okay with you all, I'm going to ask one last question. Okay, here we go. How often is the Moneysmart resource guide published? If I don't have the internet, can your agency mail a copy to me?
Yes, so it's updated. I wouldn't say there's any regular schedule to it. When we find out about new types of frauds and scams, we update the guide and then re-release it. So in order to get a copy of that, I will put the link in the chat again. It's consumerfinance.gov/moneysmart. And you can order a copy of the resource guide or of the instructor guide. And Lisa, please add on to that if you have any other thoughts.
And also there was a COVID scam supplement that just came out last year. So if you're looking for some of the most up-to-date Moneysmart information, you may want to look for that and order that in addition to the main Moneysmart guide.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Aaron. We're exactly at 2:02, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to thank you both. I think we lost Deborah, but please convey my thanks and best regards to Deborah. Thank you again for joining us during Older Americans Month to educate us about fraud and scams. We look forward to working with you in the near future. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for joining us. We give you back your afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.